Hi, I'm Alex Newman, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Black Lives Matter movement and its alleged connections to Russia. According to CNN, and I'll just pause here and say take it with a big grain of salt, anything that comes from CNN. They don't call it the Communist News Network or the Clinton News Network for nothing. I think Trump quite properly upgraded them to very fake news recently, and I think that was a good move. CNN is not a reliable source, but with all those caveats out of the way, CNN had an exclusive report recently, and it ended up getting picked up by the Washington Post, another unreliable establishment media organ, and some others. And what they said was that a Russian troll farm called the Internet Research Agency, this is apparently an outfit backed by the Kremlin, was caught buying advertisements for Black Lives Matter and specifically targeting them using Facebook and things like that at areas that were already seeing significant unrest and racial division. Two of the places mentioned, Baltimore, of course, which had some recent rioting and different problems like that after an incident involving the police. And then, of course, Ferguson, where the fake media pushed some phony narratives and got everybody all stirred up. And so according to the CNN report, Russia has been exposed, the government of Russia has been exposed buying these advertisements trying to sow racial unrest in America. Now, aside from the fact that CNN is not credible, if we think about this a little bit, we think, what motivation would CNN have to report this? Well, they've been trying for 6 months, 8 months, maybe more now, to convince us that Putin is the puppet master behind Trump and that they were interfering to try to defeat Hillary Clinton. Now, of course, that's ridiculous. I think the CNN people ought to start wearing some tinfoil hats, considering that they're still pushing this silly conspiracy theory. But this report about the Black Lives Matter movement totally contradicts that. If Putin and company were trying to fan the flames of racial division and trying to foment more unrest and encourage Black Lives Matter, that would seem to be a direct contradiction to this notion that that Putin and the Kremlin were pushing Trump. So there's been actually more news reports since then. Apparently the Russians were also caught operating fake black activist accounts. One was called Blacktivist, and they were talking about how racist America is and how evil and so on. And then you put it into historical context, right? This would not be the first time that the Kremlin has tried to stir up racial unrest and division in the United States. In fact, they have a long history of doing that. Even as recently as 1987, believe it or not. So, very recently. This was towards the end of at least the formal end of the Soviet era. The Soviet dictator, Gorbachev, came over here to the United States and was encouraging the creation of a black ethno-state in the American South that would be, only for black people. And, this was in the late 80s. And of course, they had been pushing that for decades before, too, right? The New York Times has reported all of this. Some official documents prove it, that the Soviet Union, the communist movement, was hoping to stir up and exploit racial division in the United States for the purposes of weakening the country, for the purposes of creating division and destroying national unity so that eventually America could be weakened and taken over. And now a lot of people will say, well, the Soviet Union imploded, right? It's all over with. What are we worried about? The Soviet Union's gone. Yeah, Putin's not maybe the best guy in the world, but at least Russia's a quote-unquote democracy. Well, I think we really need to re-examine our premises here, and I would point the viewer to a series of books that came out by Anatoly Golitsyn. He was a high-level defector from the Soviet Union. He worked in the KGB's Department D and came to the United States and tried to warn everybody. Say, hey, they're gonna, and this was in the early 80s when these books came out. Hey, they're gonna have a fake collapse of the Soviet Union. They're gonna have a fake liberalization in Eastern Europe, and the purpose will be to dupe the Western world into believing that communism is no longer a threat. Of course, we all can see that China, the biggest country in the world by population, is still ruled by communists. In fact, there's more people enslaved under communism today than there was at the time of the fall, ostensible fall of the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of history and a lot of context. Of course, CNN, the Communist News Network, the Clinton News Network, does not provide any of that context. Instead, if we were to try to identify a motivation for the establishment's propaganda organs to push this story, it might just be, to get conservatives to buy into the narrative that Russia really was meddling. And, you know, frankly, it wouldn't surprise me if they were meddling. But, you know, I think if we really want to look at Russian meddling in the United States, we need to start with an examination of Obama, who invited Russian terror troops here on U.S. soil for the first time in history. When I originally saw that, I actually called the Pentagon. I said, that cannot be true. Obama did not invite Russian terror troops to U.S. soil to train with American special forces and learn our weapons and tactics and techniques. And the Pentagon said, nope, yep, that's true. We really did that. And then after that, he invited the communist Chinese troops to come train with American forces on U.S. soil. Incredible stuff. And, you know, who could forget on the open microphone, right, telling Prime Minister Medvedev, I will transmit your message to Vladimir, right? Obama said he was going to have much more flexibility after the election, and boy, did he have more flexibility. And who could forget Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, Mr. Clinton getting, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars to give speeches to Kremlin-linked banks in Moscow, shortly before Hillary Clinton helped orchestrate and approve a deal whereby the Kremlin and its front companies could gain control over strategic uranium reserves in this country. So, you know, we do need to be concerned about Russia. I know not everybody on the conservative side of the spectrum agrees. I would say they're probably, you know, not looking at all of the balance of the evidence. So, as for me, I am quite concerned about Russia. And if it is true, and again, it's from the Communist News Network, so we don't know, but if it is true that the Kremlin was fanning the flames of racial division in the United States, we need to be very alarmed. We need to be very concerned. We know the globalists have been supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. We know that the United Nations has been supporting the Black Lives Matter movement and trying to stir up racial division. You know, why can't we just all be the human race? Why can't just all lives matter? Why do we have to be Black Americans, white Americans, African Americans, you know, some other hyphenated American? Why not just be Americans who love freedom and who love the Constitution? But nope, the establishment and apparently the Russians will have none of it. We need to resist these efforts to divide the American people. You know, the old strategy, divide and conquer. We must resist this propaganda, this information war that's being waged upon us. And check out the articles linked below to read more. Did some interesting interviews, got some interesting perspectives. Thanks for watching.